So, you want to be a dungeon master.
So you want to be a dungeon master.
So you want to be a dungeon.
So you want to be a dungeon master.
So, you want to be a dungeon master.
That's great. We're here to help. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Justin. This week, we're taking a closer look at where the adventuring parties have combat. That's right, it's going to be an episode all about battle maps. We're going to offer our insight on finding, using, and improvising battle maps for your D&D game. Now, most of our experience is playing virtual tabletops online, but we hope some of these tips and tricks will translate to playing around a real-life table as well. But enough chat. Let's get into it. But first... What's going to be my first? Theater of the mind. What is it? Why is it? How is it?
When is it? I don't know. No, yeah.
How dare you go off script?
Theater...
I specifically left when off the list.
So, Theater of the Mind is basically doing battle without an actual map. Basically, the way 5th edition is written, it's basically written for Theater of the Mind as far as a lot of the... there's a lot of resources for running it in the DMG, like actual Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition. But basically it's kind of managing the trickiest bit, in my opinion, with Theater of the Mind is just managing player positions and distances. So
yeah,
there are certain home rules that wouldn't necessarily work with Theater of the Mind. Like flanking really can't be a thing because it just
gets complicated.
It just gets really, really complicated. Ranges on spells can be kind of difficult. And even though it is quote unquote Theater of the Mind, I know I do it, Justin, I'm pretty sure you do it as well, of the Dungeon Master still has a vague map of the encounter.
I will
on
sometimes have a
piece of
little
paper.
cheat sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will sometimes have a little cheat sheet with me in my notes of the most rudimentary stick figure drawing of like, quickly, here are the major landmarks in the map. If there's a pit in the center or something, you know?
Right.
Trying to use those landmarks to be like, all right, well, you're by the tree, and you know that the monster is not by the tree, so you're not within striking range. You know, like,
right.
Because that's what it is. It's when you have a physical visual map, everybody's on the same page about certain things, right? You know that the monster is 5 feet away or right up on you or whatever.
Right.
Theater of the Mind, it's everybody kind of has something slightly different in their mind.
Yeah.
Not to mention you have to consider people who like aren't good at visualizing, whether it's like some people just legitimately can't do it. It's not a matter of like skill or something. It's just something that they're born not being able to do. I think it's called like aphantasia.
Some people think in words. Yeah, some people think in words. Some people think in pictures. Some people think in both.
Yeah, and some people don't like visualize anything up there.
Right.
When you ask them to think of a red apple or think of an apple or whatever, like what comes up? Is it colored? Is it the word apple? Like, you know, it's different for everybody.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think there are settings and campaigns that definitely benefit from Theater of the Mind. If you wind up not doing a whole lot of combat, for one, you know, it is very good for doing quick combats and stuff of like quick encounters of, hey, you're walking down the road and there's a guard patrol ahead. What are you doing? Okay, you're going to hide? Fine. Oh, you failed your stealth check. They see you. They're going to attack.
Yeah, sometimes you're making quick judgments and kind of like just the basics, because that's all you need for those quick scenes. That especially because most of the time they're coming up out of nowhere, so it's like imagine the amount of time.
So it's hard to have.
Like, hold on, guys, let me find the appropriate map for this, or let me draw one out and create one here on the spot.
Yeah, and I will say Roll20 is very good for throwing quick battle maps up.
Yeah, because your basic screen is just going to be a grid. So then you can just draw on it if you want to just have those really basics of like, yeah, it's a street. We all know what a street looks like. But here are the alleyways. Here's how far they are from you. You could get
it's
more
definitely
into depth about it.
Good for that, but Theater of the Mind is usually good for quick one-off encounters. If your table is really like more role players than combat people, then yeah, Theater of the Mind is for you.
Yeah, because Theater of the Mind allows so much freedom.
Right.
There's so much that players there literally isn't a map. So the DM can do the most that they can when it comes to describing things and like setting the scene and being like, you see a chandelier on the scene. Like you could set the scene and have the things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, any player at any moment can just go, is there a bucket of chlorine by this hot tub? And you have to be like, there might be. Maybe there is.
Yeah.
Not to mention, Theater of the Mind has a certain need, I think so at least, to get more loosey-goosey with the rules.
Yeah.
Like Theater of the Mind works so well for certain systems. For D&D specifically, or like something like Pathfinder or Shadowrun or those like more crunchy systems, especially like more traditional TTRPGs, especially ones that have a high focus on combat.
Yeah.
If you're going strict rules, yes, Theater of the Mind is going to be a headache because you're like, well, you're 40 feet away, so your 30-foot thing doesn't reach, or no, you can't counterspell. You're further than 60 feet away. How would you know that? How do you know everyone's exact distances if you're really using Theater of the Mind, unless you do have a very specific map, in which case, why aren't you showing it to the players? Why are you keeping it to yourself? So, yeah, when I use Theater of the Mind, I love Theater of the Mind personally. I'm a big fan of it, actually. It's challenging and it's difficult, and you have to constantly be like, not only do you just go, all right, Taylor, it's your turn. You have to go, all right, Taylor, it's your turn, and you have the one monster right up on you. The other monster's about 60 feet away. And you kind of start everybody's turn with a little update, and that helps a fuck ton.
Oh yeah. And it definitely will lead to more descriptive and dynamic combat. Players will want to pretty much be able to stay in character between the turns, because sometimes it is easy to kind of check out of that mentality when you've got a map in front of you and just strictly go into the video game mode of okay, run up here and hit X or whatever. When you're doing Theater of the Mind, it definitely having those updates every turn by the DM, and it just is easier to stay in character when you are picturing the whole battlefield as like in your own mind.
Yeah, as things are playing out. I like it. It's really fun. You don't have to worry about finding the perfect map to fit your description.
Right.
We're gonna go over tips in the episode, of course, but like, not to get too into it, but yeah, I mean, at Theater of the Mind, your map can look like literally anything. You don't have to look for one that kind of fits already or reverse engineer or whatever. I do really like it. Not to mention, it does offer itself to the spontaneity of that D&D can sometimes have. You don't have to be like, well, this isn't a combat episode. It's like, hey, it can happen at any time because I don't need a map.
Yeah.
It just happens where it happens.
Right.
If you want the entire fight to happen in a broom closet, shit, we're going to do that. But like, imagine a map of a broom closet, not very exciting or dynamic. We don't need to see it that much.
Right.
It's a small room.
Right.
It's a 5x5. So like, I'm a big fan, but
yeah, I am
it
too.
comes with its challenges.
Today's not about that. Yeah.
So
but today's not about that.
Not about Theater of the Mind.
Today's about maps.
Today's about battle maps. Let's get into the meat of the episode.
Well, let's do it.
Hey gang, we wanted to talk to you about something pretty important real quick. See, we have some really cool ideas for the future, but we need your help. You can do that by supporting us through our Patreon. At the lowest tier, you get early access to podcast episodes, access to episodes of Action Surge, our post-session table talk show, and entry into a private channel on our Discord server. At the next tier, you can get access to Bonus Action, our bonus content podcast where we talk about a huge variety of D&D and TTRPG related things, like multi-class mystery mashup, where we get 2 random classes and have to build a character, or Monster Matchmaker, where we go over our favorite monsters at each CR level, or recaps of our home campaign, plus so much more. Joining the Patreon helps us continue to grow and put out content that gets better and better as we learn, improve, and try new things. So, check out the link in the description to join the gang today. What is a battle map? What the heck is a
It's
battle map?
it's a map
Uh-huh.
that has the battlefield on it.
Whoa. Does it have to be of a battlefield?
No, it could be
Weird.
of wherever this combat is going to take place.
What
It's
the heck?
anywhere. Yeah, it's anywhere your players find themselves in combat.
Whoa. Is there
And
anywhere
you
that
wanna
combat
draw it
can't
out.
happen?
No, it
Dang.
can happen anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so,
Um,
but why do we use, Taylor, what the heck? Why do we use a map, though? Why use a map? Why not? We just talked all this this praise about theater of the mind. Why use a map?
Mainly because it makes the rules of D&D a lot easier to work with. The main things being judging distances between a player and an enemy, or just really a player and just their movement range. All of that is generally hyper specific, especially like when they do stuff like, oh, hey, dwarves only have a 25-foot speed instead of a 30-foot speed. So, if your players are all sprinting towards the bad guy, that dwarf is going to fall behind. But that's hard to really describe accurately when you're doing theater of the mind.
Yeah, you might hand wave it all together.
Right.
Just to keep things simple. Because if you're trying to remember in your head, every turn so-and-so falls behind by a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, like, God forbid that you're like, oh, wait, one of them's a rogue, so that's bonus actioning, doing something. There's a monk and a barbarian in the group. One's got fly cast on them. At a certain point, it's just easier to be like, you're right up on them. You're far away. You're
right.
kind of far away. You know what I mean? You start making up terms where you're like, yeah, that sounds like 40 feet-ish. What's the range on the spell? 120 feet? Definitely. Go for it. And you just kind of, with theater of the mind, I mean, you're just kind of like, yeah, that's fine. Or like, nah, you think you do have to use your movement to get a little closer. It's a lot of bargaining in theater of the mind.
Yeah.
I'll let you do that for a bonus action because they're making up crazy things. That's why I love theater of the mind, because of how crazy it can get with the asks.
Very
true. You're not seeing the token even of the monster. It's just nuts.
Yeah, but so the thing about battle maps, though, is that all of this stuff still exists in this world. I mean, even if we had a map with a hot tub and a little shed next to it, that chlorine tablet thing could still be in there.
Absolutely.
I find though that players are more regimented in sticking to their character sheets though with a battle map, and they will.
I agree.
They tend to not. I'm not going to say rarely, but they tend to not ask for anything that they can't see on the map already. So it is a little limiting on that aspect of things.
Yeah, they can tend to shortchange themselves because they're like, well, there's not a bucket of chlorine tablets pictured on this map, so surely that you know what I mean. It's a 1-to-1.
Yeah.
In reality, what's on the map exists and what is not on the map does not exist. But that is not the case. But before we get into the nitty gritty of how to use a map, where do we even find one? Where the heck do we get our hands on one of these maps?
Well, there's actually a couple of different options depending on whether you're doing virtual or real life. So virtually, you find it on the internet. You got the big wide old web out there.
The big wide old web. That's what they call it.
The big old wide world wide web.
Yep.
You can find any battle maps there.
BWOWWOW.com.
Yeah.
You can figure it out.
Exactly. Big old wide world web world. Wow.
It's true though. On the web, that you can find so many sources for maps. You could start simple, and I mean, it depends. I think the first thing I would ask is this just a home game, or are you looking to make this into an actual play for entertainment and potential commercial purposes? Because obviously that changes not only where you find your maps, but how you find your maps, in terms of making sure that you're paying for them, or at least crediting the artist in some way that is appropriate given what the artist is setting up their maps to be used for, whether they're for commercial use and repurposing.
Yeah, always check them licenses on what you're.
You just want to be careful, you know? But if you're using a home game and it's literally just like you and friends around your laptops or across the net or whatever, then the world's your oyster, truly. because I think at that point, my first suggestion would be Pinterest. You would be surprised. You go to Pinterest.
Pinterest is really good.
You type
Roll20
in.
has a lot of good free stuff too.
What does?
Roll20.
Oh, yes.
There's a
Roll20
lot of really
absolutely
good
does.
free stuff on there too.
Yeah, for sure. Pinterest has the unique quality of, man, it is diverse, because all you need to do is just type in any phrase and then RPG map, and something will come up.
Yeah.
Anything. You could type in White Dragon Lair, something like really typical fantasy, Beholder, Kingdom, whatever. And then you can get as specific as like a construction site, and you'll find a modern construction site. Or you can type in hotel lobby, wizard's palace, like literally anything, just followed by the phrase RPG map, those 2 words, and you are set. And then you find like related images, and it brings you down rabbit holes, and sometimes it sends you to people's Patreons, which is my next suggestion for more serious like maps. And like more consistency, depending on the tone and the setting that you're going for.
Sure.
It would be Patreon, because first and foremost, there's so many Patreons out there, ourselves included. So You Want to Be a DM, we have our own Patreon where just as free members, and this is true for a lot of map people, like map makers on Patreon, you can get a lot of their stuff for free.
Yeah.
Just by being a member, you just follow them. And they give away a lot of their stuff for free. Sometimes they'll come up with a map and you get the basic version. And then if you're a paying member, you get like the one where, what if it was on fire? What if it was at night? What if there was clouds of gas? You know what I mean? Like they do all the little flavorings of the same map. And it's awesome. Like I've followed a guy for a while, and I can't remember who they were, and it's going to kill me, but it was like a theater, almost like a Broadway theater. And then all of the versions of it were like middle of the show. The chandelier has fallen. It's on fire. It's at night. It's Midsummer Night's Dream, where there's a bunch of set decorations. Like it was so cool. All the different takes you could do on it, because of course, as a dungeon master, your brain goes to being like, well, I can start with one map where it's the show. And then if somebody casts fireball or the stage sets on fire, boom, I can switch to the fire map. That's sick. So it's just like, and then boom, they have a map with the chandelier crash through the fucking stage. That's cool. So it's like so many options. And then I'll just shout out one specifically, because we kind of shout out each other. We used a bunch of their maps for Sphinx City and other projects, because they have some incredible, like everything from just normal modern to cyberpunk to sci-fi, and that would be Frag Maps. Go check out Frag Maps over on there's so many good ones. Seppuku is really good. Moonlight Maps, Cyber Maps. There's animated dungeon maps. Those are fucking nuts. But we'll get into that later. But so many places to find maps.
And just real quick for the local, playing at the same table players, Amazon, you can definitely find a bunch of like tiles that you can fit together and make maps. That was one of my like normal go-to things when I was running 3.5 at a table. I had a bunch of like tiles that you can go, but also check out your local like game shop. Go find it.
Oh yeah.
There are a lot of amazing people there who know a lot about the games. Just in general, you don't work at a game store without having a passion for it. And it definitely shows, at least in the ones local to me. I'm sure that's the case a lot of the time is, and there's a lot of good resources there. They generally have all of the physical copies of all the TTRPG books, a lot of the supplements and stuff. There's minis, there's, dice. Oh my gosh, there's dice.
Spell cards. That's like
spell cards are huge.
Thing.
Yeah.
Spell cards are so cool.
Yeah, magic item cards, all that stuff. A lot of good resources for like straight up home players. So definitely wherever your local game shop is, go find it and meet the people there, because they're probably awesome.
Yeah. Because the sky's the limit. You can go as basic and simple as a dry erase rollout sheet that has grid on it and you're just drawing. You know, like I've heard a lot of times as for like a disposable quick and dirty, you can even sometimes use the back of wrapping paper, like Christmas wrapping paper will sometimes have a grid on the back, and you can use that. Super basic, and just draw the outlines of the walls. Like if they're doing a dungeon crawl, it's very, very easy. And then you just use the Dungeon Master's Guide to block the view so the players can't see what's coming next. You know, you've already drawn it all out. That way you only reveal as far as they've gone in the dungeon. Very exciting when you reveal it, the next part, you know?
Yeah. Another thing that I have in that kind of vein of not showing players stuff. I have a little roll up it's like a dry erase mat that you can draw on with dry erase markers. And so you can just kind of draw it as they as they explore.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, you could really just draw it as it's happening. Yeah, there's so many different ways to go about it. You can go like big and bad and expensive and buy millions of high-end stuff, or you could make it yourself and do quick and dirty. The bad guys are just Hershey Kisses, and then when you kill them, you get to eat them. Whatever, man. You know what I mean? Use different die that you have, like D6s are bad guys, D8s are the PC, like whatever, man.
Right.
You can go really willy-nilly with it. In that case, you're kind of combining theater of the mind and battle maps, because a lot of it's going to be very basic, and it's a lot of still filling it in with descriptions.
Yeah.
But we're all playing pretend anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where I think my tables really started to shine and not see the battle map as
like a crutch
set in stone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just what you see on the map. Because I did go when even on the virtual tabletop side of things. I had a handful of like maps that I went and got that are like all nice and pretty and drawn out, but a lot of the time I didn't have a map or anything. I would just draw the basic outlines in Roll20 on the screen and be like, okay, yeah, there's a cart here, there's a house over there, and what have you, but everything is just basically squares and circles and triangles on the screen, and the players fill in everything else, like the actual world building of stuff, and it works really well.
Yeah.
So by no means do you have to go out and hunt down maps or whatever. A lot of times, sometimes it's almost better to just do the basics. If you find that your players are really relying on the battle maps as a crutch for what's in the room or what's on the field or what have you, switch it up. Just draw it out basic once in a while.
Yeah, so there's so much that people can do to kind of make their own maps and figure things out for the time being. Let's get into, we have our map. Let's say we have our map. Let's go over some basic tips.
Okay.
That our fans can utilize. The first thing I think is just the difference. There's different kinds of maps. I think it depends on what virtual tabletop you'd be using, assuming you are using a virtual tabletop. Because obviously, even at a home game, if you're like playing around a table and using a real physical map, you know, if you're using a bunch of those cool design pieces and stuff, you could make this 3D map.
Absolutely.
If you're just drawing on a thing. I mean, it's 3D in our minds, but it's technically a 2D top-down sort of view,
for sure.
Which is what is, I think, most common about RPG maps.
Yeah.
Is this sort of top-down view that we become familiar with as dungeon masters, and having to sort of decide how much elevation the shading is on certain cliffs, or like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of that. Being like, I don't know, that building looks probably like 2 stories, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, so height tracking on a 2D map is always going to be a nightmare. And it's going to happen more than you think, too. Like, we don't live in a 2D world. There is a lot of verticality, you know. But another thing to kind of keep in mind sometimes is like on certain maps, you'll have like trees and stuff. I would say definitely, if you by no means need to use the cover rules, but players are probably going to ask for it. So just be aware of the fact that like half cover, 3/4 cover, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Not to mention players are going to have like cool abilities to ignore cover.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to highlight that by making sure your bad guys also know about cover.
So
and like it depends on how strict you want to get about certain things. Like when you talk about trees and cover, the thing that comes to my mind is like a top-down view. You're seeing the entire canopy of a tree, but in reality, if you're on the ground without climbing or flying, you can only use the trunk. You can't use the canopy unless the thing you're fighting is flying above the canopy, of course, but you're only using the trunk really. So it's like presumably you actually can't just hide behind some leaves.
Yeah.
And expect to get full cover.
Right. And so like full cover is nothing can ever target you. There's also half cover and 3/4 cover. Basically, that's how much of your body is hidden behind the thing. Half cover gives you a +2 to AC and dexterity saving throws. And that's basically like if the person is bigger than the tree that they're hiding behind, but it still covers up half their body. So they do still technically get some cover from that tree. It's just, it is what it is. 3/4 cover is a +5 to AC and dexterity checks. And that's going to be 3/4 of, that's like shooting out of a window or like an arrow slit or something where you still are like, you're not fully behind a wall or something like that. Like but most of your body is hidden, but you're still like, peeking through a window.
You could still be a target.
Yes, exactly.
I see you, but not all of you.
Right.
100%.
So yeah, I mean, that's definitely something, especially when you have players who have abilities like being able to either ignore cover or, not break cover or something along those lines. It's definitely, it's a useful skill to get people visualizing the map more as well.
Yeah.
To get them to engage.
Yeah, there's
with it more.
definitely, when you are looking at a map and you're the DM and you're planning on using a pre-made map, or even like in your construction of a map, that is always something to consider, is where are the hard boundaries? Where are the walls, the doors, the openings, the windows? How can my players navigate this? And what will that look like both thematically and sort of, just description wise,
right?
Versus like mechanically. Hey, here's a little part of the map that has like some kind of liquid. Maybe that's poison. Maybe they got to do con saves. Maybe they got to do dex saves to not fall in it. You're figuring all this stuff out based on the map sometimes. And just having like little ideas, you could write them down. You can have like, serious notes. Or you could just kind of like, just in your head, seeing that poison pit and going, hey, there's a poison pit.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe con saves, dex saves. Just having that thought, now you're at least a little prepared.
Yeah, and this kind of leads into the next point of if you're using Roll20, there are going to be a lot of Roll20 specific tips that we give in here because that's what we generally use. But if you're in Roll20 and you're looking at your map, you will have different layers to the map. There's the map layer where obviously the map goes. And that's generally not movable, touchable. You don't really like, you put the map there and then you generally will stay off of the map layer unless you're adding set pieces or something like that. Just
or
because
something is like supposed to move.
Right.
I've used it for like in Sphinx City in the underground abandoned subway fight with the ghost train or the ghost like subway coming through. I had that on the map layer because it was really just a visual effect of like, cool, look at the map shows up or the train shows up and then it passes through and then it leaves. Right. So it was just like a cute little thing, but yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got the player layer or the token layer. That's what it's called in Roll20. It's the token layer. And that's where obviously your tokens are going to go. Your player tokens, your monster tokens, any kind of weird auras or something like that. That's where
summon things.
Yeah, summon things. That's where all of this
spiritual weapons, whatever.
But getting back to the like making notes about the map. You can do that on the DM layer, which lays on top of everything. Now, this only you as the dungeon master can see. The players are not going to be able to see it, but you can still, it works almost exactly like the token layer.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just a private layer only the DM can see.
Right.
So I've used it to hide monsters. Like if you're like, hey, I want to put a monster on the map and have it ready. Maybe you're not even hiding it. You're just like, you don't want it. When I switch the players over to that map, I don't want them to see the monster already.
Right.
Because we haven't rolled for initiative. So you just put it on the DM layer for now.
And you can also put text
on
boxes
Roll20,
and
it's
stuff
just
like
as simple as a right click.
Yeah. To switch layers, you just right click and there's a layer is one of the drop
Switch
layers.
to layer button. Yeah. But yes, you can add text, you can add numbers, you can add all kinds of notes for yourself of where the traps are. You can even just draw a red X of where the trap is. These are the squares that are trapped, because the DM layer, the player layer, the map layer, layer is technically the token layer, like Taylor said. These are referred in, Roll20 sense, but I'm almost positive that things like Foundry and other virtual tabletops will also have something similar to this.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that this kind of tip can be pretty applicable. Something that is very specific to Roll20 because of how intense the grid system is, especially in a D&D sense, because of the 5-foot grid system being like I know you can use hexagons and there's other ways, but it's pretty worked in. Finding a way to make the maps match up with the grids.
What an absolute nightmare.
We've all had a situation where you're on Roll20 or whatever, and there's a grid printed on the art of the map itself, right? But it's slightly off from the grids that are provided by Roll20.
Yeah.
And how annoying is that?
It really is.
And
the worst.
So oftentimes, if you're getting your maps from Patreon and they'll list it. You'll find it somewhere where they'll say 24 by 35 or whatever. Or you can, find a gridless version. Of course. Yes, that is the preferred method all the time.
Every time.
Finding a gridless one. But if not, because sometimes you're finding the free one.
Yeah.
And so they only give you the grid one or something. So it just is what it is. But luckily, most of the time, those artists are incredibly generous. And so they will put 24 by 55 or whatever the dimensions of the map are. Right. And then you can line it up perfectly. If they don't, I will sometimes straight up count, man. I'll sit there and count all the, I'll count all on the x-axis, all on the y-axis, and now I know. And if that doesn't work, then I'll just put it on the map, put it to where I think it fits best, and then I will slowly make it bigger and bigger, or smaller and smaller until it fits, because it drives me nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I will take as long as it takes. And if it still doesn't match up because one reason or another, I straight up won't use that map. It's enough of a thing for me that I just won't use the map.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, if I've already gone to all that trouble, we're using that damn map. I don't care. As soon as we sit down, hey guys, the grid, I know it doesn't match up to what's going on. Like what the Roll20 grid is, you're just going to have to deal with it.
I can't do it. I can't do it. So speaking of these layers and the maps and stuff, we also have tokens. Obviously a huge part of it. Always having some sort of representative of the characters, NPCs, monsters, what have you, on those maps. And where do we find those? How do we get those? How do we make? Do we make them? Obviously, Roll20 has like some basic ones included. Just like you can sometimes be able to find some for free, and then if you're paying member, there's others. But in case let's give some tips so that they don't have to depend on that.
Yeah,
at least
absolutely. So my go-to, and I will just give a shout out. This is free software you can go get. It's called Token Tool. It's
so good.
You can look at it, just type in, just Bing it, Token Tool, and it'll be the first thing. It's a really small file, but basically what it does is you can pick any picture, what have you, and it will automatically, you can put a border around it. You can change some of the coloring on things. They have a bunch of different borders and stuff that you can put on the token itself. And then you hit export and it gives you just a nice, neat PNG file with a token on it. that is perfectly compatible with Roll20. Is just literally drag and drop from your file explorer into Roll20, and it's usable, and it's the right size. It's a good way to demarcate whether somebody is ally or an enemy, because you can put like red or green or blue circles around it, or do different colors on the outside border. And if it's there's a lot of really good things. So then it just basically becomes a thing of finding a picture you like.
Yeah, which brings us back to the copyright stuff and making sure you're doing things right by the artists and all that.
Yeah.
If you're using a home game just for fun, I don't see the issue in just kind of like going to Pinterest and just screenshotting something. And then when you pull it into Token Tool, you can decide if you want how much of your, here's what I'll say. If you make your token in such a way that you can see your character's whole body, that's like so cool when it's zoomed in.
Yeah.
The thing is, on the map, most often, you're not going to be able to see like any detail.
Yeah.
If you're using virtual maps. And this is true, like it depends on how zoomed in you are, how big maps you usually use and stuff. But like just that's something I've found over the years is like sometimes for tokens because it's true for monsters too. Sometimes with monsters it's like I want to show you all the cool body parts that this crazy ass monster has. But then I end up still just sending the players a different picture so that they can see it fully zoomed in anyway, because the little tiny token doesn't really do it justice. But you get to decide if you want just a face picture, the upper body, the whole body, whatever. And the colored borders are huge. They're so helpful. Even if you're like, if you don't want to lean on the idea of like red is evil and give things away, I guess, you can use the colors are just so helpful.
Yeah.
Even just having all the PCs be the same color sometimes can be really helpful. Sometimes it's fun to let the players decide what color their PC is. But either way, I will tell people, at least like for the most part, hey, you can make me a token and send it to me for like PC stuff.
Token Tool is so easy to get and use. I just let them do it and send me the tokens. But all of my bad guys on Roll20 are all circled with red, just because it's easy to distinguish.
It super is.
And then
it's
sometimes
really easy to distinguish.
You can get people do the old double cross where you circle.
Yeah, players are metagaming.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, geez, this dude circled in blue. He's super safe. No. He's going to stab you. He's going to stab you. As soon as you get close.
And then I've made a secondary token where
it's
he is
red.
Circled in red.
Exactly.
It's true. That's always fun too, to have like a backup token. That's why the DM layer can be such a cool tool for a little surprise of like, and now he transforms into his new form, final form.
Yeah.
So fun. Another super useful basic tip. I know that other virtual tabletops have this. Roll20 also does. And that is just icons and auras in general. So like, there's so many different icons that you can add to a token while it's on a battle map. Everything from just giving you little clues to being like, this one is invisible. This one is, restrained. This one has advantage for this reason. This one's blessed, whatever. This one's concentrating on a spell. That's the one I use the most, if I'm being honest. Now, Roll20 has a default set of icons, and I feel fine with them. I don't really care enough to upload new ones, and like I've been using them for so many years that now they all have specific meanings in my head, even if that's not what the original creators of them had intended. Like I use a very specific icon every time someone's concentrating on a spell.
Yeah.
And I've had friends run campaigns or one shots who are like my players are then the DM, and they use the same icon because they're used to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's a little swooshy couple guys.
Yeah.
It's like, that's magic.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, You're right. We've been playing for 4 years. I know that symbol now in my head. I know exactly what symbol you're talking about, and that symbol in my head is concentration. If I see that over myself or an enemy,
Exactly.
they're concentrating on something.
Yeah, which is super helpful. It's just nice to have those little things. If you're playing in person, there's a million ways you can do it. There's like the free way, which is really just using that little plastic ring circle that is on like soda bottles or water bottles or something like that. You can add colors to them if to differentiate and stuff. And maybe those are statuses that you can put around a mini, because they also sell those. You can buy like pre-made ones that will actually say the word charmed on it or something, which are incredible. It's so helpful.
Yeah.
But another icon that I think is so important before we move on to like auras or something is on Roll20 specifically, they have colors. Just like red, blue, green, and they're just like little circles. Those are so helpful.
Yeah.
Because then if you're fighting with, let's just say like 5 zombies, you do not have to have 5 different artworks of different zombies so that you can remember how much damage this zombie took versus this zombie. Did this guy use his reaction, or did this guy use his reaction? Because you can just say red zombie, blue zombie, green zombie, orange zombie, purple zombie.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. Who are you hitting again? Purple? Okay, cool. Purple. Got it. And then in my notes, when I have all the health and everything, I write zombie once. I do their AC and their hit points so that I have like just without having to look at the stat block, it's on my notes,
Right.
And then I just write like red, or I write R for red, then B, Y, purple, like whatever the letters of each of the colors, and then there you go. I can keep track of all their hit points. It's so easy.
Another trick that I use for Roll20. So the way that you get at all of these icons and colors and stuff like that, you just click on the token itself in Roll20. And then like you'll see a couple of little drop down menu things that show up on the bottom of the token. And then there's 3 circles on the top. There's a red, a blue, and a green. That's what I use to track all of my HP and stuff per whatever. So like if a player says, I'm attacking the red zombie, I still use the colors to differentiate just because it makes talking about the map easier.
Yeah.
But like when I click on, so they go, all right, I'm going up against the green zombie. I click on the green zombie, and then in the red circle is the initiative order that I have for them, or what generally it'll be which group they're in, as far as like I'll group, like if I've got 10 zombies on the field, it's going to be a 5 and a 5. That way, just to break up initiative a little bit, and I don't have as much to think of when it comes to initiative. But then the blue circle is the AC, and then the green circle I use to track the HP, because you can just click on that circle and hit -1 or -10 or whatever, and hit enter, and it'll do the math for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another way. That's just another trick that I use for tracking stuff like that on a battle map. Obviously, paper and pen works just fine.
For sure. Yeah, it depends on what works for you. And it is definitely handy to have it there. I've seen people use those circles for all kinds of things too, because sometimes they come in handy when you start dealing with height.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Because flight is such a thing, That's huge. Not to mention, we talked about it a little bit, but auras.
Yeah.
Again, right click on that icon, bring up the settings or whatever it specifically is. It's like the character sheet things. Yeah. And you just put an aura on there. I will remind people that there's by the aura, when you put like 15 foot or 10 foot aura, whatever it is, and you can change the color. There's also like a little 3-dot settings, and you have to click on that so that you can check the box that says C. Otherwise, you're the only one as the player who's going to see that aura.
Right.
Unless that's what you want, if you're just like testing something out. But if you want people to see it, and this is also true for DMs, I can't tell you how many times you put something on the field and you're like, cool, so it looks like it hits everybody. And they're like, what are you talking about? Oh, I forgot to click the little C button.
Yeah.
Always check that. But yeah, because obviously those are super helpful. It starts getting into some crazy territory, which is always going to happen with a grid-based system with specific measurements, is like sometimes an aura will just barely touch a square. And so you have to kind of come up with what the rule is going to be like at your table.
Yeah.
Does that count? Do we have to make saving throws?
Just keep
Or
it
is it
consistent.
50% of
And
the square needs to be covered. What is it?
Right.
And then exactly like Taylor said, keep it consistent. Speaking of which, all kinds of measuring tools, super handy, very helpful. A great way for players to utilize their off time when it is not their turn to set up and prepare so that when it becomes their turn, they are ready.
Yeah.
And if you're the DM, there's a really interesting little button on there, especially for Roll20. I imagine other systems will have this as well. Players can do it, but the DM can always see it.
Fair.
I have learned.
Okay.
I will still be able to see your secret measurements. Other players just won't.
Got it.
So it doesn't clog up everybody's screen kind of thing.
I gotcha.
But the DM will always see it. I choose not to be influenced by those things because that could not be a better definition of metagaming. But as the DM, if you're setting things up and if you're worried about your players metagaming and being like, well, the DM was drawing the arrow over here and then drew a big circle that was a 20-foot radius, but looks like a fireball. You can hide that so that only you're able to see your own measurements. But
yeah,
I mean, it's really helpful. Just having any measuring tools on there is so helpful, especially since they've added with the little bit of the more recent updates, like the way that they've added on cones specifically are so nice.
Mm-hmm.
Cones and different circles with radiuses. Very, very nice. Easy to just draw a 90-foot cone for your ancient white dragon.
Ugh.
Just to see everybody getting hit.
I hate it.
Absolutely brutal. And then there's, digital dice.
Yeah.
If you choose to use it. And also chat services. There's a million other things that these things also offer.
Mm-hmm.
But just basic tips, which is why I haven't gone into music or anything crazy. Just basic battle map tips, There's also digital dice and using the chat for different functions, how you use the chat. Sometimes
I always get betrayed by
people want to link up their characters. Yeah, I use it for my Pathfinder game because I don't often play in my room where all my dice are.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's just I've been using it for so long that now I'm like, it's just easier to just click the button because it's Pathfinder, so my character shit is so complicated.
Right.
That's I'd be doing so much math that it is just easier for me to be like, all right, click this button, it rolls it, adds it, done. But I agree, there is a certain. I love real dice. I'd much prefer to roll real dice almost all the time. That's the one exception. But sometimes you have characters or players in your games who are going to use digital dice because maybe they've linked up their D&D Beyond character sheet to their Roll20.
Yeah.
So you never know. I find a really helpful tip is to use it, even if you never use it for anything else, to use the in-game chat service, whether that's Foundry or whatever, Roll20, for tracking initiative.
Absolutely.
And by tracking initiative, actually,
just having people roll their initiative and put it somewhere for you until you need it.
So that, because what's going to happen is every player is going to yell out loud the second that they find out what their initiative is. They're just going to go 13.
Yeah.
And you just have to know that. You just have to be ready to catch all those numbers. Have your monsters, maybe you're rolling for them now because you didn't pre-roll them. Another good tip.
Yes.
Pre-roll monster initiatives. So fucking helpful. But yeah, that's always been a really helpful tip, is just to have them all in one designated, easy to find location every time. Consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very nice. And I think that's a lot of the basic tips for using maps and stuff. Now, getting into some of the advanced tips. Now, we talked about height. We talked about elevation, 3D, the fact that that's the world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so do our characters. But these maps may not be 3D. We may not be using Tailspire as much as we all want to.
Yeah. Tailspire is so
How do
cool,
we
but
handle
it's
height?
expensive.
It can be expensive. Yeah, it depends on. Yeah, I want to use it so badly. I just can't afford it right now. By the way, we have a Patreon. Go check it out. And hey, if you guys pay for it, we'll do an actual play in Tailspire. I'll do it all day. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Or reach out to Tailspire, tell them to sponsor us.
Yeah, there you go.
Tailspire
There
all
you go.
day.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all day.
So when you're using a 2D top-down map, how are you handling height and stuff?
Yeah.
We mentioned a bunch of the tips kind of along the way. Some of it is just as soon as the map shows up, whether you make certain notes on your DM layer, there's some that you can choose to make public, where like the heights of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
That way everyone's on the same page. You just write the number 30 next to the tree line, and then it's just like, okay, these trees are 30 feet tall.
Yeah.
We know it.
Yep.
Because it gets complicated. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of things. Somebody builds a wall of stone, and then you have to be like, well, the dragon is gargantuan, so how tall is the dragon? Can the dragon see over the wall? Like,
right.
You're going to come up. Things are going to happen that are height related. You can't avoid it.
No. But yeah, I mean, just putting notes down, the text box feature is very handy when it comes to this type of thing in Roll20. Also, just the pen. You can just, I've a lot of times just written it on the screen and with the little pen function.
Mm-hmm. Next to an NPC token, I'll just put like 50 feet, or I'll just write like a 50.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we all know that this person's 50 feet in the air.
Yeah. So,
and then like
with the players, I will generally use the little red dots, or not the red dots, but the little circles on the tokens. Yeah. That definitely is something that I use quite a bit.
For sure. I also will caution some DMs and players of getting too into the height differentials and the elevation to the point where you are slogging down combat so much where you're looking at Pythagoras.
Everybody's trying to do
trying to find out the exact things. Yeah. And what I'll say is that there are like easy plug and chug things on the internet that you can find for Pythagoras' theorem, right? So if you really care that much, you can go into it, and it doesn't, once you get used to using the tool, the online tool to plug and chug, then yeah, I guess you could make it faster. Or it's something you could do when it's not your turn.
Mm-hmm.
Get ready. Start thinking about how far your spells can go and how far you can shoot arrows, you know?
Yeah.
The other thing that we've also touched on a couple times is the relationship between maps, how in depth they are versus obviously, theater of the mind, all the way to drawn out, intense maps, and the relationship that has with player imagination and improv.
Yeah.
Because I think as a DM, you have to be, I would normally just say, you have to be ready for the players to ask about the most random shit, because it goes in both directions of they're going to find things on the map and be like, what is that? What can I do with that? What does that mean? Oh, a bookshelf? Tell me every book.
Right.
Versus the other side of the coin, which is sometimes they're going to be like, well, there's a bookshelf with books, so that's what's there. It's books on the bookshelf. It can't be anything else because in the picture, it's books. I'm not even going to ask if there's anything other than books because it says books. You know what I mean? Where it's like, no, I want you to ask. Maybe there's something crazy in between the books. I don't know.
Yeah. Man, have you ever seen a Scooby-Doo episode? You pull the right book and the little whole thing flips around.
Yeah. Ask about it. Maybe just because the drawing shows all books on the bookshelf, that doesn't mean we can't add some tchotchkes on the bookshelf. Most bookshelves have some kind of tchotchke on it.
Yeah.
A little jar with something in it. Who knows? A little display, a little art piece, a little sculpture, potion maybe.
But yeah, I mean, it does go both ways as far as sometimes your players are going to see something and want to on the map that you might have not even paid a second thought to, and they're going to want to know everything about this little thing. Or it's going to really limit them, and they're going to be like, okay, well, that's all that's in here. I'm not going to try to interact with it anymore, like interact with the space at all.
Yeah. Yeah, they feel like all the imagination, all the creation is done.
Right.
And nothing else can be added. And that can be the case. It depends on how you run your table, but like it doesn't have to be. Another advanced tip that I wanted to go over, because I always think that this is an interesting topic to discuss, is just how to handle invisibility when it comes to maps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is where the DM layer truly shines. So for players and stuff, I'll just put an icon saying, okay, this means invisible. There's one that almost looks exactly like, if you think of an icon that would indicate invisibility, there is one that is like, oh yeah, that means they're invisible. But when you're dealing with monsters or bad guys, just flip it over to the DM. Like there, you can right click on the token and send it to the DM layer. And the DM layer works pretty much exactly like the token layer. except the players can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, you could just literally make it impossible for the players to see.
Mm-hmm.
You could choose to, if again, it's going to differ table to table. You could just put the little icon on the NPC token.
True.
It does depend on how like strict and hardcore you want to get about invisibility, and like, because it's important that invisibility it only gives you disadvantage on perception, right? It's not you can't ever find this person because it only stops your vision of that person. They still make sounds, they still smell, all of those things.
Yeah.
And so it depends on how you run it at your table. Like, does every player, is it just a passive perception thing? Is it you have to use an action to make an active perception check to try and find this guy?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a bonus action? Is it a free action? Are you going to change is the DC a scale of like, okay, you got more than a 12, here are 9, like a 3x3 of where he could be,
Yeah.
Because, you and I both know that depending on the spell or the attack that you're doing, very basically, like let's say you're a barbarian swinging an axe. It straight up is like, if you don't select the right square that he's in, this invisible person,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you roll with disadvantage, but it doesn't. You could roll 2 nat 20s, you miss because he's not in that fucking square.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So, and that can be very unsatisfying to a lot of players, especially depending on how long that goes before the players either have fairy fire or some way to stop this. Eventually, it could get really demoralizing, I think, if they're just constantly being like, is he in this square? No. Okay. Well, fuck.
Yeah.
Which is why I've seen some people do it like that, where the perception, you can make it a bonus action or a free action, a little perception check at the start of their turn, and that just helps them narrow it down. You could set the DC to like a nat 20 or a 25 or something crazy, where it's like, I'll show you exactly where he is, versus, okay, you beat a 15, he's in this general area.
Mm-hmm. Which,
So,
at that point, I don't think I would be just poking and prodding. I'd be using AoEs.
no doubt.
Sure.
And that's the thing, is it depends on what your character build is.
Right.
Some characters are just going to have to be like, I guess I do nothing until the AoE dude does something. So it can still feel like, that's why invisibility is so interesting to me.
Yeah, invisibility is definitely
Because I think that there's like, it's just a weird thing.
tricky. And then are we dealing
It's a
with
funny thing to think
invisibility, the spell, or are we dealing with invisibility, the condition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to mention the idea that sometimes having the ability to go into the ethereal plane as opposed to invisibility, because that's totally different, and all those things. So it's a lot of stuff to consider. How do you run those monsters from like a very logistical standpoint, not like a RP standpoint? But so yeah, invisibility is always an interesting thing. I would suggest maybe talking to your players before it happens, before you have a fight with something that is. Like if before you throw like a bunch of invisible stalkers at them, a creature where it's like just basically they are invisible forever, unless you use fairy fire is the only way to ever see them really,
Yeah.
or blindside or something. So figuring out what works for your group, your table, your friends. Now, another really good tip mentioned ever so briefly in the beginning, you can use maps to reverse engineer different scenarios and encounters.
Oh yeah, I've definitely done that.
Because one of the benefits of Theater of the Mind is that you can make up anything. So if you had already described it being a frozen wasteland that's on a burning ball of fire gas, that's possible, I guess, in your world, because you don't have to find a map that does that impossible thing. You can just invent it in your brain.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to find physical maps, I can't tell you how many times I've been like, yeah, you guys are looking for this crazy vegetable forest where the green onions are so tall, they're like sequoias. And then going on Pinterest or wherever I'm finding maps and being like, no one's drawn a map of giant Honey, I Shrunk the Kid vegetable gardens.
Right.
Like, what was I fucking thinking? But I found one that was all mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, I had to like retcon and sort of retrograde, make that shit, right? But going forward, it's been really nice sometimes to find maps ahead of time, and be like, whoa, this is a really cool map. How do I get here?
Yeah.
How do I get the players here? Why are we here?
That's definitely a solid tip, is to find the maps, because there have been a whole bunch of times where I've been wondering what to do in a session. Like for a session, this is kind of when we were just playing fast and loose back in the day. But like not really sure what the encounter or what have you is going to be, and then just scrolling through, just doing a generic battle map search and finding, oh, this is a cool thing. Let's put some plot points in here and figure out, okay, like Justin was, like you were just saying, of how do we get here?
Yeah.
And honestly, I've had whole sessions based around a cool map that I found.
Oh, yeah. I found some really interesting maps where I'm just like, okay, I got to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get the players to this harbor dock?
Right.
Or this underground fight ring, or this, like, just, people are amazing what they create out there in the world. Yeah. And so it's just that so inspiring. Sometimes you can find maps and then reverse engineer your whole way into it. So fun. And that can get really specific too, in the sense of like using the map as inspiration and like finding those little tiny details in the map and thinking about what they mean, what they, what stories do they have to tell. So fun.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
And you can always add things to a map.
Absolutely.
Make the map your own. Yeah. Add layers on top of it, whatever. That's
hey, where Roll20 really shines for me. As far as like, I found the map, I know what I'm doing, and then you can find all kinds of set pieces on Roll20. Just the free Roll20 stuff has so many different set pieces that you can use.
Yeah. There's a whole like search feature
drag onto the map from
tokens,
the side. Yeah,
maps, and different little set pieces to add on to different things. I will say that like there are certain, like, obviously it's a little bit easier to find like more typical fantasy related things on Roll20.
True. Very true.
Than it is to find like modern or sci-fi. Even like I would argue that sci-fi is actually a little bit easier than modern, but that's just my own journey. Because I often, looking for modern maps for like Sphinx City, I will often find like intense cyberpunk and hyper futuristic stuff much easier, where it's like, no, I just want a normal construction site. I don't want there to be lasers. There doesn't need to be this much neon in the city, actually. And so that's a lot of like trying to figure things out. It's like, goddamn, every cyberpunk map is like raining in the nighttime.
Yeah.
The street lights are bright pink and blue or something. But yeah, there's so much you can do to just add little tiny effects to maps, to add a lot of fun little things. Even just like putting in a little graphic of coins because there's treasure or something. Just a cute little touch. Yeah. You never know. And that just helps make the map more dynamic. Not to mention just having ideas for little things and like what parts of the map you're going to utilize in your descriptions and in your combats, from like the standpoint of, I know that there's a little switch on the wall, and I know that one of the bad guys can go over and click that switch, and then I have a graphic of a cannonball shooting or whatever.
Right. I will say, just from like a technical standpoint, if you're going online, like going elsewhere other than whatever your normal tabletop setting is, if you're looking to like download stuff and import it onto Roll20, I've noticed a few times where I've downloaded stuff off of the internet, and it, like, Roll20 really only wants to deal with JPGs and PNGs. It doesn't like anything else. Yeah. So when you're saving stuff, just make sure that you're either saving it as JPEG or a PNG, and you should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, every once in a while things can get a little finicky. I think you're going to run into that with most programs. Because, like, my next big tip, and because this exists in the world and it's fucking sick, and I'm trying to find out ways to use it more often, but, like, I don't know if it's my subscription level with Roll20 or what it is exactly, but, like, there's something, believe it or not, you can get animated maps.
That's crazy.
What? There's a whole Patreon called Animated Dungeon Maps, and boy howdy are they fucking cool, man. Some of them are so intense and so interesting. Just like, and some of them, it's very basic, you know what I mean? It's not like the most crazy thing in the world. It's just like, oh, a coastline, but the water is crashing on the rocks and making white water.
Right.
Like, and that's just like, it obviously goes in a loop.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah, it's just a cool feature.
Yeah.
It's just a cool thing just to make the maps a little bit more dynamic, make them feel more alive. Like things are really moving and shaking as you're having this fight. And not everything is stuck in time the way that a obviously normal art piece would make it seem. But it just it's another cool way of doing things. Obviously, the way you would set it up is to obviously make it loop, because these videos it's not like hours and hours. It's just like a 10-second, 30-second, 1 minute long video that just goes on a loop. But will Roll20 let that work? And it hasn't let me do it in the past when I've downloaded free things that animated dungeon maps have offered. Again, I don't know if it's a subscription thing or because it is very much not a PNG or a JPEG, right?
Yeah.
It is like a MP4 or an MOV or something. I can't remember specifically off the top of my head. But either way, it doesn't work.
Well, Roll20 is a resource hog on its own.
Yeah.
Just on its own. It makes my computer chug. When I've got Roll20 open and D&D Beyond and all that stuff, like on our typical combat session days, it's like my computer is like the fan spools up even more. It chugs. I'm trying to do it. There is a mobile version, but the mobile version is very difficult to use just because of how much memory resources and stuff it takes to actually run.
Yeah, it definitely can be a little overwhelming at times from just a computer standpoint of usage, but also it is truly one of those tools, just like Foundry, just like Tailspire, I imagine, where you can be really basic with it. You can just get your vanilla ice cream in a cup, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what I would argue I do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I put sprinkles on it, but for the most part, it's vanilla. And it's because I like that.
Yeah.
I personally, and this is no shade to anyone who does it differently. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying it's not for me personally. I'm not interested in like having a video game alongside of our D&D game where it's like so intense, like every single time you hit somebody, like hit the NPC, like a graphic shoots up on the screen, spells actually show up. That's dope as hell. It's just not for me. I'd so much rather just like have the description and the explanation and the sort of theater of the mind aspect of things than to have like every little thing show up on the screen. Not to mention it's so much extra work.
Yeah.
Which is probably the most important part.
Yeah.
But there is so much you can do, even with Roll20. I know Foundry and Tailspire are more known for that, but Roll20 also has like insane things on there. Like if your character casts a fireball, they shoot a fucking fireball and it explodes on screen. There's graphics for that. But that is also taking a ton of computational power and graphics and whatnot. Sometimes not just for you, but also for your players who are also in the same game. But wherever you find your maps, however you decide to use them, they all bring us to the same place, and that's Fresca.com.
Oh, no.
Fresca, thank you for... They all bring us to the same place.
That's all we can get into this time. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Soyouwannabeadm.
WorldNet.
Or you can ask us a question at Soyouwannabeadm@gmail.com. If you liked the episode, don't forget to give us 5 stars and a review wherever you found us. And check us out on Patreon and Twitch with the link in the description. Join us next time for more Dungeon Master tips and tricks.
Bye!
See you.
And now I get to shout out the members of our Patreon gang. Nub Muffins, may Palor's light shine upon you. And then there's Tappy, Molly, and Elijah. Thank you all so much for being members of our Patreon gang. Remember, you can find the link to that in the description of the episode. And also remember this. We love you. Thanks again, and tune in next time for more tips and tricks from So You Wanna Be a DM.